All right, now one of the things that students have a hard time with is fractions. And so as you can see, all of the questions on this page have fractions in them. And I'm going to teach you how to kind of deal with them and how to work with them as you're trying to solve equations. Now remember, as we're going through, that one of the main things is that we are working through Pemdas, and not forwards, but because we're trying to get back to one of the things that we started with, we're actually working through Pemdas backwards. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. Let's start with this first one, 3/4 x equals 9. All right, now there's two ways to deal with this, and I'm going to show you both of them right now. Actually, there's more than two, but I'm going to just show you two. So we have 3/4 times x, so what are we supposed to do? Well, you're supposed to divide, right? So in order to get rid of the multiply by 3/4, we divide by 3/4. But you know that when you divide by a fraction, if I divide by 3/4, it's much easier to do something else, right? You're not supposed to divide by 3/4. You're supposed to multiply by the reciprocal, 4/3. So that's actually what we're going to do. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to multiply by 4/3 and multiply this by 4/3. Now remember, when you multiply fractions, they both have to be fractions so you can multiply the tops and the bottoms. So this is going to need to be over 1. All right, so we go 4/3 times 3/4. And when you multiply by the reciprocal, that's the same as dividing. So that means those are going to cancel out, which will leave me with an x on this side. Equals, and then I've got 9 times 4, which is 36, and then I've got 1 times 3, which is 3. And when I work that out, I get 36 divided by 3, which is 12. Now again, just like in the previous videos, you can take that 12 and put it back in for x if you want. Substitute, and it should give you 9. Now I want to show you another way to do this. All right, so I'm just going to recopy the problem here because it's a little bit messy up there. So 3/4 x equals 9. Another way that you can deal with fractions, instead of dealing specifically with this fraction, you can actually just multiply by the denominator. Okay, because what this is 3 divided by 4 times x. And so you can actually get rid of the denominator first. And so what we're going to do is, rather than trying to get rid of the whole fraction, we're just going to multiply by 4. Now watch what happens when we do that. Remember, this is 4, but I'm multiplying by a fraction, so I need to make it 4/1. So 4 times 3 is 12, 1 times 4 is 4, and then 9 times 4 is 36. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and there went the fraction. The fraction is gone because I multiplied by the denominator. Now from here it's easy. You just divide by 3. So I don't have to do any difficult math with the fractions. It's just getting rid of the denominator. So there you go. You got x equals 12. All right, let's look at another one. Okay, let's look at the one over here on the right. 2x plus 3 over 7 equals 5. All right, so in this case, remember, we're following Pemdas. Now it's tempting to say, oh, well, the addition needs to come first because addition subtraction is at the end. But you need to remember that back when we first learned about order of operations in Pemdas, we said if it's in a fraction, the stuff in the top or the stuff on the bottom is its own little world, right? So put it in parentheses, because it meant that we had to do that stuff on top first before we divided. So now we're working through Pemdas backwards, and we notice that the thing in parentheses, that's actually the most important thing. So that's the one that we're going to do last. We're going to work backwards. And so what we're going to do is, well, we're going to start with this division here. We've got this parentheses divided by 7. So before we can deal with the parentheses, we've got to deal with the divide by 7. So in order to do that, we're going to multiply by 7. So I go times 7. And so the times 7 and the divide by 7 cancel out, leaving me on this side with 2x plus 3 equals 5 times 7, which is 35. So then I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, because if you do it to one side, you got to do it to the other. So I've got 2x equals 32, and I divide both sides by 2, and I got x equals 16. So there you go. You could take the 16 and plug it in, substitute it in, and it should give you 5. 2 times 16 is 32, plus 3 is 35, divided by 7 is 5. All right, let's go on to the next one. Here on the left, negative x divided by 3 plus 2 equals 7. Well, let's go through Pemdas. So to go through Pemdas, we're going to do the addition subtraction first. This you could treat as if it's in parentheses, but that's the only thing. So the addition subtraction will come first, so we'll subtract 2 on both sides. Don't move this because that has the x. Generally speaking, we're not going to move the x unless we're moving it so that it can be with other x's. Most of the time, x is just going to stay where it is. You don't need to worry about it. So negative x over 3 equals 7 minus 2, which is 5. Now at this point, you've got a negative, and you've got x over 3. There's several things that you can do from here. You can treat it as you did the one up there. You can do it, it's a negative, so if the negative is bothering you, then how do we get rid of a negative? We multiply by -1. So we just multiply by -1. So there we go. The negative times the negative will give me a positive x over 3, and the -1 times 5 will give me -5. And then from there, it's x divided by 3, so we just multiply both sides by 3. And so the 3 and the 3 will cancel out. Times 3 and divided by 3 are opposites, inverses. And then we've got -5 times 3, which is -15, and that is your answer. Now, with that in mind, at this point right here, there actually are a couple of other things that you could do. When you have the negative x over 3 equals 5, remember that this being negative means that either the x is negative or the 3 is negative. So if you wanted, you could just rewrite this. Probably the easiest way to rewrite it is x over -3 equals 5. Now these two things, though they look a little bit different, are actually the same thing, because x divided by -3 will give you a negative answer. It'll be negative x over 3. Now you could have just as easily put the negative on the top with the x, because a negative divided by a positive is negative as well. But in this case, it would make it a little bit easier, because now you just multiply by -3. Both sides cancel out. X equals 5 times -3, which is -15. So there you go. Hopefully that kind of helps you get some ideas of how to deal with that fraction. Let's look at one more. Okay, again, this one I'm going to do in two different ways. The first way I'm going to do very similar to the types of two-step equations you were doing before. So we say what comes first, the multiplication by 3/5 or the plus 3. So here we go, subtract the 3 first. So then I'll have 3 over 5x, -12 minus 3 is -15. And so at this point we've got 3/5 times x, so the opposite of that. Remember, we dealt with that up here. So you can either multiply by the denominator, or you can multiply by the reciprocal, which is the same as dividing by 3/5. So my personal choice is I'm just going to multiply by 5 over 3, the reciprocal. Okay, now remember, this one needs to be a fraction so that you can multiply, so make it 15 over 1. So 5 over 3 and the 3 over 5 will cancel out, leaving you with x equals -15 times 5, which is -75 over 3, which then gives us -25. Okay, so let me show you the other way, and this is kind of neat. The other way is we can deal with, remember we talked about getting rid of the denominator? You can actually do that in the very beginning. Notice that you've got a denominator of 5. So what you can do is you can just take the whole thing and multiply it by 5. Now recognize this time that there are two terms here on the left side, which means that the 5 has to distribute to both of those, and the one on the other side. So we're multiplying absolutely everything by 5. Now for the fraction, you'll need to make that 5 over 1. So that will make it 5 times 3, which is 15 over 5, x. 5 times 3 is 15, and 5 times -12 is -60. Now from there, we should be able to go 15 divided by 5, which is 3x. Notice that the fraction is now gone. And then we got equals -60. And then it's just simple two-step equations now. The fraction's gone because we chose to multiply by the denominator and get rid of it. So you subtract the 15, then we do the multiplication because addition subtraction is before the multiplication division. We divide by 3, and we get x equals -25, which is the same thing we had before. Again, you can take this and substitute in for x, and it should give you the same answer. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of help on different situations that have fractions with a negative, where the whole thing's a fraction, where it's just part of the problem. And so hopefully that'll help you deal with fractions as we go. All right? Ciao.